What's up? What's Gucci? What's goody like? Welcome back. I am back. And today's going to be a little bit different. So I hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, but like I said, today's going to be a little bit different. Like I said in my last video, I don't really care to be vetting about stuff at this stage in my life, at this given moment right now. But that might change. So I kind of wanted to talk about a poem today because I had an assignment which was due yesterday night. Actually, no, it's due today. I submitted it yesterday night. And I kind of rushed through it, but it's still pretty much valid. But I was kind of hoping that after me submitting it, it was just like so much left in me that I kind of wanted to talk about, but I didn't want to put it in the paper. First of all, my professor, he was requesting it that at minimum our be about like 12 sentences, and yeah, I'm Java so mine's kind of, I know it exceeded 12 sentences because it almost came up, it did like a page and a half, my response. And it would have been so much longer if I went through all of my whole thought process. So I kind of just submitted a little kind of generic version or whatever, something that wasn't really too biased in a sense of how I perceive it. I kind of kept it general. Also, I kind of don't want no one thinking about me. And I'm in this whole conspiracy mindset lately. I'm enrolled in a community college, and it's a lot of things going on in the college that I'm in that just don't make sense. And I kind of feel like I said, I'm just in a conspiracy mindset. And I feel like the assignments that's being generated or whatever, for us to do, I don't know why I'm just getting an impression that we're doing these assignments and it's being used by somebody else to submit as their own work in another institution or something, somewhere, whatever. I don't know. So, long story short, I didn't want to put my best effort for this specific prompt because I don't know, it was kind of more personal. The course that this is for is an introduction to poetry course. So I don't know, for me, it is a bit more personal. I've kind of spilled the tea, so to speak, for other courses when it came for me just putting my best foot forward and putting all of my effort into my work. Because so thus far, I've just been taking a lot of either writing courses or reading courses and stuff like that. So it is a lot of writing has been required of me. Yeah, so I've been putting my best foot forward, but I don't know because this is poetry. It's been putting me in a certain mindset lately. And I'm also taking another course. It's a composition course. So it doesn't tell a lot of writing. So right now, the mental space that I'm in is kind of more poetic because of the poetic course. And I've been already into like a mental kind of restriction where I didn't want to. It's just going to take too much effort to be bouncing from a poetic mind to kind of a literal mind because I'm taking these two courses. One is poetry, the other one is just like a general composition course. So the prompts, essays that I have to write for him, you know, I would assume the expectation is more of a literal approach when writing versus a figurative approach that would happen with poetry. But ironically, the first essay that I did have to submit for, and I'm kind of going into a backstory off the topic of what I was coming here for, but everything kind of matters. So it is a little bit of a venting, even though I said I wouldn't vent, but it's a positive vent. Whatever. Yeah, so the first essay that I had to do for the composition course, it was a defining narrative. Basically, what is a friend to you? So I just gave my response, but because it was so a friend is something that's personal, my response became personal. And being in the whole being enrolled in a poetry course didn't help with, the emotional aspect of my response. So he's probably reading that essay like, what in the what? Because I feel like I use a lot of metaphorical language and just figurative language within that essay because I was already in the headspace from my poetry course. But it is what it is. I need to do what's simplest for me at the moment. And since I'm already in this mind space, in this portion, I'm just going to do that all throughout my life right now because I ain't got time to be mentally juggling, you know, different ways to approach things. Like, it's just, I have a lot going on. So I'm not doing it. Yeah, so moving forward, the poem that I'm going to be discussing today is "The Sick Rose" by William Blake. This may be a part one, part two video because I do have a feeling it's going to be a little bit extensive. Because even though this is a short poem, literally is two stanzas, 4 lines in each stanza, so 8 lines total. It's short, it's cute, it's prompt, but because it's so short, it is lacking description. So it does pull a reader in a sense of, and it's using figurative language. So it does pull a person in to just wander mentally. Like, and because it's poetry, you also got to keep in mind that you have to almost separate yourself from the poem itself and not let your life experiences and, just your own mental state in that given moment take over you and guide, how you're interpreting the poem. Because, like I said, when it comes to poetry, it's, well, I didn't say it to y'all, but that's one of the things I kind of put in my submission yesterday was poetry is just a state of being, literally, like a state of one being. Whoever the poet is, it's a state of their being in that moment, that mental space, wherever they at mentally, wherever they at spiritually, emotionally, physically, however they're witnessing that because of their mental space, like everything is them in a state of being. So even though they can relay a message to you and, just out there in a figurative way and paint pictures and compare things to give you a better view of what they're trying to say, will never understand completely how the person feels because that's them at the end of the day. And also, a lot of poetry sometimes it's made to, sometimes people aren't completely truthful. I said it's a state of being. So if and it's I'm saying that because this poem specifically, there is slightly a undertone of shame in some sort of way, because there is a secret that's referenced in the poem. And because they reference that, it puts me in a mental space of, okay, so there's something that's said, but it's to a certain degree, it's not been said. To a certain degree, it's unsaid. So yeah, I just bear with me, all right, because it's a small poem, but it's a lot to dismantle, and it's crazy because the other poems that he gave us 6 poems in total. I'm not going to go through them, but they're all kind of elongated except for one. It's called like Ox something. Shoot, my light just died out. It's called like Ox something. It's the only one other one that's pretty short, and I guess this is a sonnet. It looks like a sonnet, but Ozymandias, Ozy, Ozymandias, Ozymandias by Beach Shelley. Percy Shelley, Percy B. Shelley. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. I only first read the first three poems that we were supposed to review. So let's just jump right in, I guess. So the Sick Rose. Basing off the title, this is how kind of how my professor wanted us to break things down. That's another thing, but that I'll get into that later. Because well, actually, I might as well just get that out the way. The way my professor wanted us to break things down, he wanted us to follow like a 9-step rule or a 9-step approach to what's it called? To pretty much breaking down poetry. And I understood the way this procedure works. The problem is process things and to help kind of make things a little bit more simpler for me, I can't use this approach. Steps to follow when questions to ask and sample reading notes. Yeah, some of it is helpful, but some of it is kind of like I'm a person that dissect as I read. I can't separate reading something and then dissecting it. As I'm reading it, if there's something in it, I get to a part where it doesn't make sense, my mind naturally starts trying to make sense of it. And if I continue, it irks me a little bit because it's like I'm continuing, but now nothing's making sense because I haven't got to the bottom of why this is said the way it's said, especially when it comes to poetry. So, off just I'm gonna be in and out of his kind of process and my own personal process. So initially, he he wanted us to base things off of the title. So the title is The Sick Rose. Capital. Okay, so I'm gonna just all right because it's like I said, it's a lot to dismantle. And another thing is I don't have my course text. I've kind of been just getting things offline that's available online. And so the copy of the Sick Rose that I got, this is it's just very basic. It's nothing. This isn't the original copy. I guess you can consider it to be the generic illustration of the Sick Rose, but the initial one, it has like a picture, and I'm gonna insert it in this video. I actually might just make that like the backdrop of the video and just have my my video in the little corner or something to give a better understanding. But initially, before me even seeing the original copy of the poem, I was just working off of this. So I didn't have images to reference to more clear understanding or even be led in a way, so like I said in the prompt that I submitted last night, I'm kind of happy that I didn't have the course text if the original illustration was submitted into the course text, because it would have taken away from my kind of authentic approach to the poem and how I authentically receive what the author is saying. Me not having a text, but I don't know because it's kind of weird that he put a link in our portal to a wiki page a Wikipedia page that was kind of like a facsimile, I think it said, of the original illustration of the Sick Rose. And when you click on a link, you actually, it gives like a quick synopsis of, the background of the poem and stuff, but it's a picture of the poem. And it's also like, it's a whole illustration. Like, it's a whole different ball game when you have the original versus coming and operating off of this. But like I said, and honestly, I kind of recommend it. I recommend dealing with, but at this point, once I start breaking stuff down in this video, it's kind of pointless because you're going to already have an intake because I'm kind of giving my intake. So I'm not even going to mention that. Um, all right, so The Sick Rose. Off the title, initially, I automatically, expected the poem to be about someone beautiful because of Rose. I automatically assumed that someone beautiful, we all know roses to be associated with women, but I kind of wanted to keep an open mind for this. For some reason, I just was innately geared to keep an open mind and not directly into women for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, so Rose, I automatically took it as maybe it's, a beautiful person that's sick, possibly withering away. Or it can also be a reflection of love, a sick love. But then it also brought me back to the space of a beautiful person, a love, someone's love withering away, dying off, or whatever. So that was my initial thought based off of title alone. So I'm just gonna run through it one time, and I'm gonna try. It's kind of hard to have to convey my initial thought process because I done read this poem so many times now. I've already established a point of view, so it's difficult remembering where I was initially versus as a in opposition to where I am now. So, Sick Rose. O Rose, thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy life destroy. This, based off of the initial read, I took it as I took it as explain it. Um, it's pretty much basically like it's shit. It's pretty much basically like someone dying, but the secret part is what's kind of like throwing me off because it's like they're dying. It's like something or somebody's being exposed about something, like the speaker themselves has a sense that they're being. I'm taking it like they got a sense like they could possibly be exposed about something, and that's can kind of like kill them off. But it's like they're telling this to someone, if that makes sense. Okay, so we're gonna go through it again. O Rose, thou art sick. Was I should mention that initially my mental space, and this is something that I wind up having to research because initially for some reason I've always had the impression thee, thou, thy are, with the exception of thee. But thou and thy, I always had the impression that it was like I and my. It was a reference to oneself and not someone else. Keep that in mind. Thou and thou being I, or like a reference to me, and thy being like my, still a reference to self. The kind of being interchangeable. It can be talking about oneself or it can be talking about someone else. But, you know, we're not even going to put the, because the isn't in the poem. So, kind of, yeah. So, second run through. O Rose, thou art sick. Thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm has found out thy bed of crimson joy. In his dark secret, love, does thy life destroy. I'm laughing because the more I read it this way now, the I got the rhythm, so it's starting to sound more appealing to me. But when I initially read this, the worm part did not make sense not one day. And when I say not make sense, I don't mean like the symbolism of it, but I mean the way it was coming off my tongue as I was reading it. I'm like, why isn't it rhyming? You understand what I'm saying? Because in the first stanza, the sequence is pretty much A B A B. But when you read it, worm, okay, so put it like this. At sight, the sequence will appear to be A B A B. But when you're reading it, worm and storm, like saying it right now, it sounds like, but it doesn't. Worm and storm don't really rhyme. If it was norm and storm, that rhymes. Form and storm, that rhymes. But even though worm and storm have the ORM, for some reason it does not sound right. I'm gonna say it again. Oh, thou art sick. The invisible worm, sorry. Oh, Rose, thou art sick. The invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm. Worm and storm do not, they're pronounced differently. With worm, the OR is pronounced ER. And in storm, the OR is OR. Or, yeah, it's OR. It's not pronounced like like you saying there, or it's storm is pronounced if you'll say wore, like you wore a shirt, or, worn, worn out, but worm is ER. So it's not flowing. So initially in the first stanza, the sequence in reading it would be A B C D. A B C B. A B C B. Yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. A B. Okay, so that's the second stanza. All right, making sense now. Okay, so the first stanza would be A B C D. In reading it. At sight, it would be A, B, C, B. So, and now this is where things got a little funky. And like I said, I've read it so many times. And after a while, this poem will cause you to be poetic yourself. And you have to rework it because it's like, if at sight is set up as an ABAB sequence, well, ABCB sequence, why when you read it, it's not set up? It doesn't sound like ABCB. It sounds like ABCD. And this is strictly the first stanza. When you read the second stanza, it does flow. It is ABCB. We'll jump into it. The second stanza goes, has found thy bed of crimson joy, and his dark secret love does thy destroy. So that flows. But the reason why I'm laughing is because I kind of have an accent myself. And when I'm seeing worm, it's kind of like, it I don't know if it's my accent now. That's what I'm saying. It's kind of hard to tap back into my initial intake on the poem because initially it was not flowing, but when I read it now, I've gathered my own rhythm for the poem because I've done research. I believe his name is something Bitten, Britten Benton or something. I forgot, but he's a composer, and he actually partnered the poem with the music. I think it's like called the Serenade to something. Initially, when I made this video, I told myself I kind of wanted to do like a screen to screen kind of thing, and as I'm talking, I can show y'all the screen so that I can give you more of a glimpse of how it's operating. But I'm outside right now and I don't have internet connection, so that's not gonna work. I'm just gonna do this kind of a rough way, but you'll still get the gist. But like I was saying, the composer that I'm talking about, and I'll fit his name in this part. But he added music to it, and it was so drawn out. Like, and the way he reads it and he delivers his rhythm to it, it's very dramatic. It's very sad. The music choice is sad, which is kind of, excuse me, which is kind of accurate because the poem itself has an undertone of like sadness, shame. There is love in it. There is passion, intimacy, but for the most part, it's more so. I'm not gonna look at it. That's his perspective. It is sad. So I can understand the music choice, and I can understand the way he delivered the poem within the clip. You can actually see it on YouTube. The Sick Rose Serenade, something like that. I just know his last name is like Bitten, Bitten. But like I said, I'll put it in. Yeah. So moving forward. All right. So in breaking this down, Rose. So the first stanza reads, "O Rose." Well, I'm not gonna. The first line reads, "O Rose, thou art sick." Now, like I said before, because once I start using its literal meaning, it kind of it kind of offsets me mentally. And it's bad to say it like that because it's kind of like, okay, well, I'm changing the meaning of the poem, or I'm taking the poem out of context because I'm not using like literal, the literal definitions for the words, like thou is supposed to be like your. That's the literal meaning of thou. Your, well, definition, your. Thy literal meaning is thigh. You? It's hard for me to remember because to me it's mine. I think, yeah, thou is your, thigh is you. That's their literal meanings. But to me, for some reason, I've always was under the impression that thou is I and thigh is like my. Using that context, not. And that's the best way for me to read it because when if you put it in here, I mean, it kind of works. If you said, "Oh Rose, I not I are sick," but it would be, "Oh Rose, I'm sick," in like a kind of simplified, very straightforward language. I would perceive it as, "Oh Rose, I'm sick." But in its literal sense, it would be, "Oh Rose, you're sick," or you are sick, Art. You are sick. And to me, I just don't get that part. And that's why this I'm gonna stray away from that because when I read it that way is like the speaker is telling somebody they're sick. I don't know. And then they have a period at the end of it. So it's like, "Oh Rose, you're sick, period." And it's just like, okay. And then they go on to saying the invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm. Throw your threw me off. O rose, thou art sick, the invisible worm that flies in the night in the howling storm. So you're telling me this, they're sick. But when I read it, that's okay. So the first research I did, I came across some guy's interpretation of the poem, and he kind the way he broke it down, he didn't say plague, but he put so much emphasis on like being sick. That's another thing. That's another thing. Okay, so another initial thought that I had was after reading it the first time down, it sounded like somebody cheated on somebody. Like I said before, somebody cheated on someone. Tag. I'm actually gonna cut this off because we're at 32 minutes and I don't want to be uploading long videos. So I'm gonna continue in part two.